It's Tuesday, 2/22/22, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
This is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Solid fade.
I already ruined it by hitting the cord with my finger like that.
Shut it down.
Instantly, perfect fade and an instant fail on
All right.
the entire show. It's scrapped. All right, we're going home,
From
guys.
the top, hit the jogger. Let's go.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone, to the Beer Temple just the Beer Temple Podcast. We're not doing an Insiders Roundtable today.
Kinda.
We kind of are, but kind of not.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Chris Quinn. I am joined by your other host, Mike Shalal. What's up, dude?
Not much. Glad to be here. Glad to be here on Tuesday.
You're repping the brand I see, and you're somewhat brownish. So is that
This is called Sandstone, according to independent.
is that the color of
Sweatshirt
new farmhouse breweries? Because I have a very similar color.
That's
shirt.
more of like an olive. This is really more of a light sandstone. So
More of an olive.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
see?
kind of actually in between
Yeah.
the two colors.
All
This is
of them,
great audio
pretty much,
format
exactly.
podcasting. But
This
this
is-
is pretty much a spectrum of.
This is the visual.
beige.
Yeah,
Brown and sand.
exactly. It's American Psycho business cards
That's right.
seen all over again.
That's right.
But I'm glad that you're doing well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me too.
yeah. We're here for.
How are you doing? No one ever asks you how you're doing, Chris.
You know what? I'm glad someone asked, because you know what? I'm not doing so well.
All right, moving on.
Yeah. No, I'm very tired, and I'm kind of in a bad mood, but it's okay.
Great. It always makes for a good show.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
But it's we're in for, I think, what I hope.
I'm
is,
excited about this
yeah,
show.
an informative show, an actual useful show.
Yeah.
For once, not just pure conjecture and speculation, inaccurate speculation.
You mean foreseeing?
Foreseeing. I was just going to say, one of my favorite examples of that is when the whole premise of the show was how we knew what was coming in beer and had four experts gaze into the future of beer, and then the very next day, Monster bought Canarchy and nobody saw it coming.
That's right.
Literally the next day.
You said gaze in the future of beer, not energy drinks, so kind of narrowed
agree.
the focus there a little
Yeah.
too much.
I also
That's
look
on you.
so far into the future
That's right.
that where I'm living, that was already the past.
Right. I was only looking into the future from when the show was going to air,
Right.
not when we recorded it. So
Right.
That's our fault.
That's true.
our bad.
Yeah. So it was our mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway,
But how could we have seen that?
this show is going to be actually informative. But before I get to that, I do want to give the thanks. I want to thank to everyone who's listening, who has been giving us feedback, been getting some social media feedback lately.
Nice.
We like all of it. So I would prefer if you left your feedback in the form of bottle caps.
That's right.
Any scale, it can be 1 to 5. You create your own scale. It can be a 27 cap scale. I don't care.
It's the only thing I understand anymore.
Yeah. Everything I see. I'm like Keanu at the end of The Matrix, where he can see it, but I just see everything
Just
in
green
bottle
bottle
caps.
caps
You are
streaming down the
you are
screen.
bottle caps right
Yeah,
now,
that's right.
and I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't think you'd be too happy about how many
Did
bottle
Darren,
caps I'm looking
did
at.
Darren inform the bottle cap?
I'm
number
looking
on
at a quarter of a bottle cap. When I see you, it's like when Charlie Chaplin looked across and the person turned into like a pork chop or whatever in Gold Rush.
So you
I just
just
see
see
you as a sliver of a bottle
That's
cap right now.
like my society score on WeChat or whatever's going on in China.
But anyway,
Anyway,
I want to
edit
thank
that
the
part out,
listeners.
sir. I don't want to get
I want to
canceled by
thank
China.
WLPN 105.5 Lumpen Radio for having us on. As always, I want to thank Fade Master Surge, and I think that's. I don't want to thank anyone else other than that.
That's it.
Really.
End of list.
End of list. So, what are we talking about today, Mike?
I mean, financing your brewery and what part of your brewery you want to own, and what are the benefits of owning the equipment versus owning the retail outlet versus owning the means of production, essentially. So,
And you yourself, maybe in that, yeah,
perpetually trying.
you're
to
walking
figure out-
around. You're walking the lot. You're kicking tires right now,
That's
so to
right.
speak.
That's right.
So it's a very selfish
Yeah.
episode for you.
Yeah.
Most breweries don't have tires, Chris.
Well, it's a metaphor.
No tires.
No.
You guys have tires. You have a forklift.
Oh,
It's a hover forklift.
Oh wow.
Back to the
it's a
future.
water.
You guys got a lot of PPP money, huh?
No, I think you just have everything in about half a foot of water,
And you can just-
and
you just
it's
push
one of
it.
those hovercrafts where it's just
Big fan from Home
Yeah.
Depot. Yeah.
Like in the Everglades or something.
Yeah,
Exactly.
fighting off gators.
that'd be great. That would be on brand for you guys.
Beer for floating.
Well, we have. Well, no, I can't. No, it's not the round table. I can introduce them in any order I
You know
want.
you can do that whenever you want.
No,
whenever
I
you want.
can't. I
That's
can't.
true. That's good.
The round table,
Kind of principles.
there's rules, but this isn't a round table, so I can introduce Mr. Bleitner first. Welcome back to the show, Dave Bleitner of Off Color Brewing. What's up with you, man?
Not too much. Just doing the beer thing.
Yeah.
Doing the family thing.
Yeah. You've
Trying to
since you've
stay
been
warm.
on since you've come on the show last. You now have a second location, right?
Correct. Mousetrap and
Yeah.
next to Whole Foods downtown.
Is that how you describe it? It's like-
Yeah, it's right next to the Whole Foods, the big one, one of the big ones.
And across from the strip club.
I wouldn't know about that, Chris.
Oh, okay. It's funny. That's how I always describe it.
Oh, okay.
Off color, across from the strip club.
It's a BYOB strip club too, so you can get your growlers or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. That's fine. That's not true. I don't know.
It's funny. You're
of-
backing off something that you've clearly done in the past.
Yeah, we do not serve growlers there.
Oh
You're,
yeah.
you're
See?
about to talk about the
Yeah.
seat that you sit in usually, and then you're like, I don't know about that. But anyway, thanks, Dave, for coming on last minute. I should add too. So thank you. Appreciate that very much for making it happen. And we also got a special Zoom guest. Once again, we've got Banker Dan, I guess, is how he's going today.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. All
Because
right.
we're going by nowadays.
Okay. Banker Dan.
Gnome to bank.
Gnome to Bank. And for OGs of the show, you know exactly who we're talking about. This is a gentleman who knows a thing or two about fine. Well, what do you know? What's your expertise, would you say, Dan?
Depends who you're asking. If you're asking my wife and kids, I don't know very much.
Oh,
So
I love the monocle
yeah.
though.
you can't leave it there. You got to
Yeah,
give a real answer.
The top
Yeah.
hat's a
The
nice
top hat, the
addition.
monocle, you got the whole thing going on.
The mustache, the
Yeah, I
tail,
do
the
got the
tuxedo with
mustache,
tails
so-
and gray
Yeah.
pants.
yeah, so have had the chance to work with a number of breweries on various financing rounds, for expansion, and just looking forward to discussing, what as a banker, kind of what we would look for, what we like, what we don't like, what works, what doesn't, just to educate anybody interested or thinking about seeking a loan at some point.
Yeah, and when it makes sense, and the ways to go about doing it, and how to kick the hover wheels and
The air pocket underneath their hover
Yeah.
forklift.
And then from my side of things, I'm curious, like, does it even matter? When do you want to do that? Don't you really just want to license your name like Donald Trump would do, and have, a beer with your name on it, and then just get the social media and become an influencer? And that's what all the kids want to do these days. Seems to me like
right.
they're all doing quite well. So
All
Work
the
for
ki-
Frank Thomas.
yeah, exactly. Make some Big Hurt beer, stuff like that. I mean, so that's kind of where my head's at. I
Yeah.
mean, do nothing and scam the world.
You said the quiet part out loud.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah, Mike, I'll kind of guide things a little bit, but
Sure.
I think if you're if you're kicking tires, you can certainly ask away and talk about whatever we want. But the idea was we have, someone who knows the banking world and kind of all the intricacies of the different programs that are out there and different ways to kind of get your product to market. We've got you, Dave, who's done it now twice, right? You've got two different things that are operating in very different spaces too, right? You've got one. I mean, I guess, do you technically have to go? Do you have to go at the original spot?
We did, but the Mousetrap took that all over.
Right.
So it wasn't really worth having the other space open.
Right.
You have a couple
So
people
it's
come in
a
a day.
pure production facility,
Yeah,
right?
So right now it's pure production. We still have the license, but it's not staffed or anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
And then you've got a more classic brew pub, right? Is that what you call
brew pub.
it?
Yeah, brew pub. It's full production brewery in the back. We do specialty beers there, wild fermented, barrel aged, that kind of stuff, blended, and yeah, it's served out the front door. But most of that beer is served on site, in addition to the stuff that we bring over from our production facility, which also is the majority of our distribution beer.
Now, this is just for my curiosity. You don't brand them differently depending on where they come out of, do they? Do
No,
you?
it's all off color.
Oh, just off color, right? Okay, that's what I was pretty sure was the case. But
There might be some benefit to doing that, but I think our brand in particular is strong enough that we don't have to make another fake brand behind it.
Right. Well, you guys also started kind of in the Saison wild fermented beers. That was kind of in the mix to begin with.
The risky, stupid things. We're like, let's put the wild bred beers right next to the other one, and it's all over the floor. And you're like, John, what are you doing? I'm casting in.
Well, usually when you have like your other brand, it's when you have like your wild stuff, or you're like, we're a lager brewery, except we're not selling enough, so now we also make hazy
Hazies.
IPAs. So, well,
we're a traditional German brewery, except for now we
Except for
make
the hazy IPAs.
hazies and pastries.
yeah. Well, I'm interested in. So, Dave, you guys started, and the intention was just to be a production brewery, right? Back in the day.
Yeah, just when we
different time,
started,
right?
it
It was
was,
like
but we
2011.
were, John Laffler and myself had brewing backgrounds. We didn't have service backgrounds.
Right.
So it wasn't about, we just wanted to make beer. We started with the intention of, hey, this isn't even going to work. So let's plan for that,
That's a good way to go about it.
which is kind of funny because when it was brought to the SBA, they saw our models and our forecasting. They said, well, this isn't going to work. And we're like, yeah. And if it does,
Duh.
it's
Be sick.
it's gonna be way better than this.
Yeah.
They're like, well, your valuations aren't high enough. And they said, well, I can make them whatever I want. It's just some numbers that I put in a spreadsheet. They're like, nope, I'm sorry, no. So
And so
we had to go the more traditional way.
you guys opened like 10 years ago?
It'll be our 9th anniversary is in May of our first beers.
Congratulations.
So, thank you.
And when you went to do that, you said you started at the SBA.
Yep, we went
then-
to we had a small pool of investors come in. Everybody just throwing in money that they didn't care if they lost or not.
That's your sales
Friends,
pitch.
yeah, that was it. It's like you're probably never gonna see this again, but maybe in 2022 we'll cut you a check.
Yeah, never underestimate the
How's
power
that coming up?
of
Are you
people.
cutting them checks this year or what?
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, good.
Good.
That's nice.
So instead of SBA, just straight equity
Straight up.
sales?
We had increased the equity. I was going to do a 50-50 split. Did not.
What do you
work
mean
out
by that 50-50? Like just for people out there.
Yeah, 50% loan, 50% private equity, and then keep the rest kind of in the back pocket.
When you say private equity, it's like friends and family.
Friends
not-
and family
not like
and
a,
fools.
Not like
Yeah.
like a firm that needs to sunset and their funding
Yeah.
to sunset.
No, it wasn't even that much money now.
Yeah.
You're looking
In today's world, but when you're starting up, it's
Yeah.
giant amounts of
the most
money.
amount of money you've ever
that's
thought
so many
about.
numbers
Yeah.
in one number.
Do we need that many zeros on there? Yeah, we probably need like 2 more.
Can you put some more decimals in it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
and that choice
There's
is
4 decimal points.
and so that choice was mainly driven by your ability to access different types of funding.
Yeah, I mean, we once you get the ball rolling,
Yeah.
you have some money in the bank, you know what you're doing a little bit. That's when the bank's like, okay, well, now we can talk to you, and you have a net reserve.
Right.
that they can see that you've already gone that far, and then it's assessing the business plan and really betting on the people that you're showing up to. Because when you're starting up, it's here's some paper. I wrote some stuff on it.
Right.
What do you think?
Right.
And it's up to the bankers to decide, no, it's good, or it's bad, or it's okay. We'll see. And then, after you have some working history, show profit over a few years, then they just like to throw money at you.
Huh. Nice.
So,
Good
yeah,
to know.
Right. And that's usually when you don't need it as bad.
Sure.
So
Okay,
you're like,
man.
oh, I need it. And they're like, no.
Now you can't
Yeah,
have
It's
it.
like, fine, I don't need it. And they're like, oh, really? They must be really successful.
You have to play hard
Yeah.
to get. You have to play hard to get. So then we've got, on the other side, the guy that you're talking to, that would be, Dan's side of things. And I think that's kind of what we've got going on. And
Right.
then I did forget to mention that one of the main impetuses for this was I was talking with Dan, and we were just chatting back and forth about how Hop Butcher bought essentially 2 breweries within several months of one another,
Like all of us are doing right now.
right? From 2 other breweries, right? They bought one from Half Acre and they bought one from Five Rabbit. Five Rabbit was much more of a production facility, and Half Acre was their original facility, production facility, but became more of a mousetrap type spot. So they're like going full bore with the off color model. Jeremiah was supposed to be on the show. Jeremiah could not make it. So luckily, I just know everyone, and I knew somebody with almost the exact same situation going on. And
But we did
dialed
ours
them
over
up.
the course of like 5 years, not.
I mean, would probably a good
Months,
idea.
yeah.
But so I figure, we could just kind of start there. I mean, to me, it seems like the way things have been leaning is to, and this is a complete outsider. In this case, me, of a supply side outsider, looking in and seeing, everyone's been using excess capacity at other people's breweries or going the contract route.
Sure.
One of the big success stories in Chicago brewing in the past several years has been Maplewood. And they've been doing a lot of contract brewing. A ton of people are doing contract brewing. We just redid our whole walk-in cooler. Yesterday I was telling Bleitner, and oh my God, by the way, that took over
Couple minutes.
over 5 hours. 3 people over 5 hours to
But why
move
did
it.
you start that? What was you just walked in, you
Okay.
go, it's wrong.
Well, you have to understand me and things that bother me. Every time I look at them, and then eventually I just need to redo it. It didn't make sense. So what happened was, it used to be when you walked in, it went East Coast to West Coast in front of you, and then you had imports on the left and wine, and then on the right side, because if you imagine it kind of like I don't know, kind of like a horseshoe or something.
Like a U.
Yeah, it's a U.
Horseshoe.
Yeah. And the right side was local. Now, local started spreading, so it went around the corner and pressed everything else in, and it started
This is a
making
metaphor for
no sense. Yeah. So now we just do it west to east. We do Germany
West
and
Chicago
Belgium.
to East Chicago.
So we expanded imports. We also felt like the imports needed more love. So we actually did compress U.S. craft to increase import, increase wine and kombucha and cider, just give it a little bit more love in the cooler, and just make it look nicer. But where I was going with, and it looks so much better right now, we were noticing how many people are using even one single contract brewery here in Chicago, Great
And
Central. So many breweries
There's
are
probably
using
even more than you know that are
Oh,
actually
I
using
bet
them
you
too.
there are. I bet you there are.
Or using someone like that or some other facility.
Yes.
Even breweries you know that have a facility might be using a separate
Yeah,
facility.
exactly. Like Maplewood, right? I mean,
Maplewood.
for example.
Yeah.
But a lot of places
Yeah.
were doing that. I think Illuminated is doing that. I believe Middlebrow,
Middlebrow,
is doing that.
infrequently, yeah. Beguile uses other facilities sometimes.
Yep.
During seasonally.
War Pig
War Pigs is now
is doing
in,
it.
in Wisconsin, though. They're
Oh, okay. Well, they used to be at Grand Central, maybe now
Yeah.
they're with another one.
a couple of NA brands are brewed out of there, too. Big drops out of there.
Okay. Yeah. So to me as an outsider looking in, that's how I see more people kind of going, kind of leaning that direction. It's what you're doing right now, Mike, to a much smaller degree.
Yeah,
you're not really contracting. Though,
Yeah, we brew all of the beer ourselves. We package it ourselves, and actually
which is
have
the name for that is
it's like an alt prop.
alt prop. Yeah.
And we actually own our own tanks and some of our own equipment. So
Right. But it's closer
yeah,
to that.
Yeah,
It's
we pay them rent, but it's just for the place to store stuff and
Right.
all that. So it's not like we have our own facility or anything.
And then I was talking with Dan or chatting with Dan, and Dan, you were mentioning that you would like to talk about what you felt was the importance of owning the means of production. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it was right on the heels of the Hop Butcher thing. So I thought maybe we could just talk about like when is it important to own what do you need to own? Do you just need to own I mean, do you really need to own the production, or do you just need a storefront to sell it out of so you can do own premise and to go and stuff like that?
I didn't know there was a gong in here.
Yeah, well, that's these things. You can blame Fade Master Surge for them. No, I'm kidding. You can blame me. I bought them.
those.
I bought them. You can blame me. Or you can blame Surge. I would not mind if you did, even if it was wrong to do it. I wouldn't mind if you blamed him instead. That's all I'm saying.
All right,
It's okay. He likes
Surge.
it.
Why
Surge,
did you let Chris buy those?
Surge enjoys blame. That's one thing I've learned about him. Trust me. You'll be doing him a favor.
Yeah, I think the question is, Dan, as someone who understands the actual economics of breweries more than even some brewery owners probably, what do you see the value of owning and the means of production, and what does the means of production mean to you in that context? Like, is it the actual brew house, or is it just the outlets to sell it?
And I also want to say quickly to Dan and to Dave, don't wait for us to ask you the questions. Just please jump in and have a discussion. Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I look at it, and I've been on the show in the past and have talked about this. Like, I look at breweries as this interesting mix of manufacturing and hospitality. And so when I think of the means of production, I think of it as two tiers. You first say you have your equipment, and then you have the actual facility itself. And, even before we address at what point, should you work with a bank or look at equity, I think you have to, and when you're evaluating bank options, I think you have to really think about what the role of the bank is in the equation. And banks fund growth. They don't fund startups. So if the view is I have this,
and why is that?
Start
Risk
and reward are just off. So a bank loan might be somewhere between 4% and 6%. Startup companies obviously have a colorful history in terms of their performance, right? A lot of companies fail, especially within the first couple of years, 5 years of a loan or 5 years of operation. So the banks are there to fund growth. So Dave, to your point about, once you're doing well, they're happy to throw more money at you. It's because you've proven the concept out. So, we were looking at, Chris, when we were talking about this, I tend to look at it, the equipment's kind of the easy piece. Whether you lease or own your facility, you need the equipment to produce your product. But, in that manufacturing context and thinking of a brewery as a manufacturer, I think owning your facility, the production facility, is extremely important, because not only do you have to make considerable improvements to the property for the business to be able to operate, but also, if you're you're leasing and the landlord decides to sell the facility, that's extremely disruptive to your business. And once your lease is up, it's up. So you don't want to have to then relocate. But if you own your facility, it brings a sense of, more permanence to the business. And I think is the right move in the long term. If you want to talk about retail outlets or brew pubs, I think that's a separate issue. But
the hardest part of that is knowing, how much square foot you need. I mean,
Sure.
The building itself is a huge investment. It's like its own separate investment almost, because you're just your own landlord at that point. So you're saying at the same time, how are you supposed to know the square footage you need, the amount of space you need,
How did you
the
get?
amenities you need? Because a lot of these people who are starting up don't even haven't been on a floor before.
They don't know what they don't know.
They don't know what they
Yeah.
don't know.
How did
Exactly.
you? How did you go about deciding that when you opened the first?
The square footage.
Yeah.
I think roughly you can do 1 barrel of beer
Per square
per
foot.
square foot. That kind of works.
for
Unless
that-
you're going to do
With that-
10 barrels of beer a year.
And that's like a brewery that's
doesn't make
a,
sense.
a production brewery with a distributor.
Yeah,
one barrel per square foot is pretty.
That's
standard.
the rule of thumb. But if you're a startup and you're saying we should buy our own building, and then you say, well, where are we going to get the cash to do that? The bank's going to say,
Right.
we're not going to give it to you.
Right.
You know. So I guess what would you do if you're starting from scratch then?
Well, I think you're in a proof of concept phase at that point, right? And I think that's where raising money, using your personal savings, bootstrapping a business probably makes the most sense. You don't want to buy the building right out of the gate if you don't know where you're going to go. But once you at least reached a point where you can make that, you have the cash flow because you've been paying rent, you've been paying for your facility, you've been paying all these other expenses. It makes it a little easier to predict. I mean, the banks are just going to do, it's pretty simple analysis, right? They're going to look at your cash flow. So the simple addition is, okay, they've been paying $5,000 a month in rent for the past 2 years. We think they can own the property for $5,500 a month. They can swing that payment. That's an easier analysis versus, well, we hope this works, which is what, a startup and projections look like. I think in 15 years, I saw one set of projections that was just terrible. It was a sea of red for 4 years. And he's like, well, I think it's going to be pretty rough for about 5 years. And I appreciate the honesty, but yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the truth. And Dave, to your point, if it can't just be, I need the spreadsheet to look better, because I mean, that's what it almost feels like. But, one of the things I like about contract production and have done on a few occasions is, it's take me through your contract production, what you're paying, and then normalize that to normal production. So you can be contract brewing for a few years and then come up with a way to normalize that production run to what your costs would be in a similar structure, and almost come up with a pro forma income statement based on if you own the facility. And because you've proven the concept out, it's worked. You've been able to operate the business on a contract basis. It's easier for the analyst to substitute in what more normal, a normal ownership structure would look like if you were not leasing. So if you were not contract brewing and actually had your own facility, it's easier to substitute that and still get credit for the business's history.
Yeah, because you have sales.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, what about, what is the most expensive? It seems to me like the most expensive part of the ownership in that instance is owning the production facility, not the front of house facility. I would think with the Mousetrap, for example, Dave, do you know what was more expensive to build out the production capabilities?
house.
The front of house is
Yeah.
more expensive.
The finishes, yep, all that stuff.
Okay.
The chairs.
That's also a very nice place.
Yeah. Yeah, but
a lot of breweries just throw up a card table and call it a tap room.
they said we could have up to this much money, and we said we already spent that much money. Can we have some more? And we had cash flow, so they said yes.
And they said, great, now we can have our tiler make a little picture of a whale in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Or
We did that.
Yeah.
We did that individually. It was fun. We put every tile out and put it back into place.
Fun.
We're waiting for licensing to come in. It doesn't really matter.
No, I'm surprised because that the front of house costs more than the back of house because from a square footage, I mean, it's less than half, right?
It's about 50-50.
Is it? Okay. Okay.
Accounting the cooler and all that stuff that feeds the front of house.
Right. I guess that does it for both. Okay. Well, because what I was thinking is, does it make sense to lease the back of house and own the front of house? But maybe it's.
Well, you were thinking that the brew house is probably the biggest singular
And it
investment.
also
Yeah,
depends
which
what
is
you're
probably
doing.
true singularly.
Oh, the packaging line.
Packaging line.
Oh, yeah. Money.
Yeah. What kind of packaging line do you guys have there?
We have a 6-head Cody can filler. And then off of that, there's the labeler and the
Right.
pack tech applicator and
Right.
the little tables and all the little gadgets that
Which-
do all the things
Right.
on the side that
Which are all
all
things
cost $15,000
somehow. Yeah. Right.
How much is it? It's $15,000. What does it do? It moves the can with its little finger a half inch this way. And you're like, I do need it moved over that way a little bit. You can finance it. I'm like, oh, okay. What's the interest rate? They're like 8%. I'm like, oh, okay. That's not.
That's not too bad.
For moving that can over an eighth of an inch. Yeah, I think no.
That you're joking, but not really.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
It's hyperbole, yeah.
Yeah.
Not
It
too
scrapes
far.
the foam off and then replaces it with a layer of nitrogen.
I'm just notorious for buying stuff that I've never seen before. I just bought an ultrasonic leak detector. So we were having problems detecting our seam failures. So this thing like shoots ultrasonic waves into the can. So when it's spinning down the label, it's like shooting like a geyser out. And we're like, oh, that one's leaking.
Oh, really? So it like agitates it in the can,
if
so it'll.
It's crazy. If you open one right before, it's normal beer. If you open it afterwards, it looks like something that should have been refrigerated that wasn't refrigerated.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You lose about a third to half of it just opening it up. So
Wow.
just pulses of wave. And that's what we're here to talk about. Ultrasonic technology.
That's pretty cool. So
Now-
I
now
got
you need
distracted
one.
By that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for our hand-filled bottles.
Exactly. All right. I'm just checking
So
on
Dan,
something very
as a
important.
brewery, say they're switching from a bottling line to a canning line. Is that when they should start talking to a bank? Well, they have sales, right? They've started up. They've tricked their friends and family and themselves into believing this thing can work. And then when would be the ideal time to you for them to talk to you, where you'd be like, okay, now it would make sense, or when for putting together a loan or some sort of, I don't know, access to
I think-
capital.
Yeah, so I think there's the track record component, which you're speaking to of sales. Like I think having 2 years, they say 3 is kind of a higher end, but I think having 2 solid years of performance is really key. And when you're making so say you're moving from a bottling line to a canning line, being able to frame the request under, this is not only is this the piece of equipment we need, but this is what it's going to do in terms of our sales. And with this equipment, we're going to do the following, right? It's kind of setting the stage and almost making it easier for the analyst to evaluate the request, whether that's the banker you're talking to or the people behind the scenes who are doing the number crunching. Is to just say, look, we can afford it. We think the payment will be, $2,000 a month or $1,000 a month. And based on our cash flow, historical cash flow, we can afford it. And by the way, this is also what it's going to do forward looking. So it's like we could have afforded it then, and we will certainly be able to afford it looking forward. And I think that's when you get into those sort of situations, the likelihood of success goes way up.
So I guess that goes into your point of, why are people contract brewing? And that's
I guess
proof of concept.
proof of
Proof of
concept.
concept.
Because to start with 0
Right.
and be like, we're going to do this much, which is what we did.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
wild guess and be pretty accurate. Was, it's hard to dial in all those finance numbers with just no history at all.
Right.
Well,
Right. Especially like if you're trying to do something that's either at a time when it's new, like there weren't as many craft breweries when you guys were opening up. There
yeah,
wasn't
the business plan we wrote said 1,800.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, that's not many now.
Yeah. Right. Well, or you're trying to do something that it isn't the normal model, right? It's hard to project those things.
Yeah.
We started our brewery with $1,500 in the bank, and then after a couple months, they allowed us to have a credit card. Yeah. So
What was your limit?
15,000.
Look at that.
Yeah. Which
About that.
we only carry a couple thousand on at any given time now, actually, because we've been able to pay it off. But that's
Get
not,
those points.
Yeah. Well, look, $500 of our first year revenue came from getting extra points from Chase, so that was a good month. But yeah, that's why we started the way we did. Is that first of all, we were doing something really weird that I didn't even know if it was going to work, to be perfectly frank with you. I wouldn't have admitted it then, but selling 500 milliliter bottles of Saison is tough. But I also just didn't want to have anyone else tell me what to do. So we started.
Well, guess what? Yeah. Everyone's going to tell you what to do.
Not this
right,
far.
Mr. Monopoly?
Exactly. The banks will certainly tell you. Yeah. They still control you whether they tell you what to do or not. Right. They kind of are telling you what to do.
Right.
I want to do this. That's fine as long as you pay me. But if you want to be paid, I have to do that.
Yeah. So you do that.
Yeah. So they're still telling you what to do.
Of course.
Yeah. We used an SBA preferred lender for the Mousetrap expansion, which was 75% through a bank loan.
Yeah.
And he goes, we're just, no bullshit, no anything like this. It's no strings attached loans. I'm like, we have to pay the money back, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, one string.
Yeah. One chain. Very Gordian
no
knot
strings,
on a string. Yeah.
One big chain with a padlock around your neck.
Yeah. For the rest of your life.
I'd always joke, like, I'm not in the lending business. I'm going to get my money back business.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a fair way to state it as well. I think it paints a clear picture of the frame of mind that the lender is in, which I think is useful, especially for a first-time borrower. Mm-hmm.
Shark Tank.
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
without the dramatic music in the background.
Right.
Well, that's the main reason you would go with a loan, right? Is not to give up equity in your company.
Right. Right. Well, you tell us, Dan. I mean, why go with the bank versus going with, let's say, not like friends and family private equity, but like a professional private equity lender type deal?
So I think a little bit has to do with how quickly you want to grow, right? The bank can be really good at financing capital expenditures. So your facility, your equipment. I think when you start getting into build out or more retail space, the lending, we're not as keen on that. Private equity is jet fuel, right? It's not tied to necessarily immediate cash flow or show me what your sources, your uses of the funds are. It's more a little bit more patient form of capital that you can deploy more creatively, but it does have an endpoint. If you're raising money from a traditional private equity company, there's an exit at some point, right? You can look at a lot. I mean, of course, I remember going back 5 years talking about some of these transactions that are now coming to fruition, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like, well, at some point, the fund who backed the deal is going to need their exit.
Canarchy, what we were just talking about. Yeah, right? I mean, that's what happened there. Everyone speculates.
So, I mean, there are, say family offices, which tend to be take a much longer view. But in general, for the debt market is substantially larger than the equity market. I mean, 10 times its size.
So can you explain what you mean by that?
The debt market just being traditional loans, right? Whether it's a facility, the commercial, the retail on the residential side. We look at the stock market, we look at the size of the stock market, but in reality, then the debt market is substantially larger than the equity market because of all, the lending by all these different institutions into these companies. So, if it's more a matter of equipment, if you're past the proof of concept phase, even if it's in a tiered approach, I think the debt, traditional bank loans, whether they're SBA or conventional, we can get into the differences between those, is a really clear and predictable path of growth. You have an obligation, you have a monthly payment. And that's kind of the downside, right? Is that every month that bill's due, regardless of how you're doing, regardless of the state of economy, whether there's a pandemic or not, that bill comes due every month. So, versus private equity or capital, which it takes a little bit more patient of a perspective compared to a bank. So I obviously I work in the debt industry, so that's my perspective, but I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it just depends on the business and what you're looking to get out of it, right? And what your prospects are over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you have people like Uber, who is like, hey, I need $50 billion. Right. And someone's like, can you turn a profit in? And they say no. Like, well, what about in a year? No. What about in 10 years?
Probably
no.
not. Yeah.
Okay, fine, you can have it.
Yeah.
And then I don't think a bank would.
Can we
do
trick
something
someone
like
else
that.
into doing this 5 years from now?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Take as much as you want.
Oh my goodness. So that's kind of how I often kind of think about is like what you said, crazy growth and explosive growth, like someone like Uber,
Sure.
who just came from literally non-existing just a little over probably 10 years ago or something like that, which is hard to believe, to now just like having completely taken over that market, and created that market in places that did not have taxi service and stuff like that before. Probably not banking is probably not the way to go, but is beer or manufacturing really, that doesn't really seem like that type. Well, I guess maybe Shark Tank has people who like make weird little gadgets that allow you to like
Yeah, but those are all
peel a
contracted.
banana
They're like,
easier.
oh,
They're
we just make
contracted.
those in China and
Right.
ship them over in crates, and
Right, and
that's just contract.
Well, that's also
manufacturing.
that's not bank loans. Those are people that are taking equity for the most
how am I
part.
to
Right?
get
That's what I
money
mean.
there.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Well, my point being like, well, maybe manufacturing is more conventional, but then I was like, well, maybe not, because you have like the Shark Tank stuff where it
Yeah,
but
I
they
think-
don't own the manufacturing. I guess they just have.
I think one of the things that gets lost in that discussion of equity and debt is the beat of the loan payment each month, and it kind of just bangs on your head a little bit and kind of pushes you a little further.
Yeah.
Then I think
In a good way,
Yeah,
you're
in a good way. Like we're gonna have to make this work,
Right.
and it kind of makes you be more creative,
Right.
focus more on problem solving than the equity market, where it's like, we'll figure it out eventually.
Like when you start, like, we'll probably lose all your money.
Yeah,
Give
you
it to
know,
us anyway.
Yeah, it might be okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying I won't wake up in terror in the middle of the night if I have equity rather than a bank loan?
Yeah,
that's
but
still-
I wake up in the middle of the night like that I left the sink on, so it doesn't really matter what wakes me up in the middle of the night.
Okay. Might as well wake up about something truly important.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I have nothing. And I'm going to be exposed by the bank when I can't pay them.
They're all gonna find out about me.
Yes, I'll just blather it on radio one day, and then it'll be out there.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah.
Saying those inside thoughts again.
Exactly.
Well, so Dan, what are the major differences then between like an SBA backed loan and a traditional bank loan that you were alluding to earlier?
Sure. So, the SBA is a credit, would be considered a credit enhancement. So, the SBA runs two main programs: the 7A program and the 504 program. And for scaling, the last numbers I think I saw were that the 7A program was 4 times the size of the 504 program.
And
So just to put that in
Yeah.
context, that so the 7A program issues a guarantee to a bank. It's like an insurance policy. So it's effectively an insurance or a coverage rate, a guarantee. It's a guarantee against loss. So if you had a $100,000 loss at a 75% guarantee that the bank would only lose 25, the SBA would chip in the other 75. The 504 program is probably more of a partnership, in that it's probably better for loans that are either facility or equipment oriented. I'd say $1 million is probably a nice benchmark for a project just to look at. But how that program works is that the bank will take a first position on a loan, roughly 50% of the project. That a bond will be issued in partnership with the SBA and Community Development Corporation, or CDC, that will take the next 40%, and then the ownership will take the 10%. That's the most common structure. So 50, 40, 10. The advantages of that program, 504, I'm partial to it for brewery expansion specifically, when you're talking about facility and equipment.
It's lower
You can get
interest,
20 or
typically.
What's that?
Is it typically lower interest? Is that correct? Sorry, I didn't mean to step on.
So it's a blend. It's a blended interest rate. So you're going to have a conventional loan for half the project, and you're going to have a bond for 40% of the project. So that 40% can either be structured, say if it's a facility, on 20 or 25 year note with a fixed interest rate that's pretty low. Much lower than even conventional markets, because it's getting its financing from the bond market. So I think it does a really nice job of blending or almost synthesizing a larger company's ability to go to the public market to raise money. So what it does is on a monthly basis, all these 504 loans are pooled together and then sold off to investors, which brings the cost of funding, way down. We're talking 3% range instead of, some conventional debt, which might certainly be more than that. You would actually probably be paying more for the first position loan than you would for the bond. And that's going to be a fixed rate for the term of the loan, 20 or 25 years.
Right.
So why conventional or SBA? Conventional, or I guess the SBA loans have what's called a credit elsewhere test. It's the idea that, we wouldn't make this loan on conventional terms without the guarantee. So it can be a little tricky because how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that something is not available elsewhere? A lot of times for a brewery, it means that you're going to have really a business who's using it. It means you're going to have a lower equity position. So on a typical commercial real estate loan, conventional might require 20% down. The SBA would require 10. So you don't have to bring as much equity, which is good for two reasons. One, it allows you to maintain more reserves. It's not that you should put all the money into that 10%, but that say you had some reserves in place that, from a bank's perspective, I'd rather a company with little cash in the bank than someone who's pushing everything they have into a loan. Mm-hmm. And then you have the ability also from a term perspective to go out a little bit longer. I wouldn't typically do 25-year financing conventionally, but with the SBA, we can do it, which lowers the payment, for the brewery and improves cash flow. I think SBA lending is more about cash flow than it is about collateral. The conventional market, fewer rules, lower costs. So it's more or less, is the bank comfortable with what you're asking for? And if yes, this is what they'll offer. And there's no constraints or, program that they're following. They offer what they would in that space. But there's a lot of breweries who get financing from SBA lending, so much so that certain lenders even have specialty beverage, I guess at this point, winery, brewery, distillery, lending teams that cater to the industry.
And in just split hairs even further, between the 504 and the 7A, those are the two SBA, correctly?
Yes, correct.
Are there differences in what those will typically be willing to fund? Like you were saying that you don't really want to do build out. You can't really even do that with 504 typically, right?
You can do some.
Yeah.
But the 7A program is a little more flexible because, you could do everything from, the soft costs of a brewery to a build out of a leased facility, theoretically, if you can find a bank to do it, versus 504, which is very real estate and equipment dominant.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that I think I'm partial to 504. I think it's especially for that. Imagine you're going from your leased facility to your more permanent facility, or you're getting to that point where you have an idea of the square footage, or you can even buy some additional space. You have to occupy the majority of the space, but I've seen, transactions that used industrial condos that they were occupying two, they bought those two, and then they bought two more with the idea that they would expand into it. And, on day one, they expand into the third, and they lease out the fourth one for a period of time until they need it down the line. So, those are some of the more creative uses of the product that I've seen, recently.
Yeah. And when in your experience in the past, are most breweries doing just one of these types of loans? Are they mixing two of them? Are they mixing like lines of credit at bank plus an SBA loan? Are they mixing in like an equity raise and an SBA loan to fund their growth? What have you seen most breweries do, and what have you seen most breweries be successful with?
I've seen a combination. It's not uncommon to see a mix. So, and what I mean by mix is that, think of it as phase one, phase two, right? You might have an SBA loan from your initial facility, use that to buy some equipment, and then you use a 504 loan to purchase the facility, and you move over your equipment to your new facility. So you'd still have essentially the initial loan outstanding, and then you'd have a 504 loan for the facility. Having a line of credit, I think, is always advisable, regardless of the business and how you sell and how much inventory or receivables you carry at any point in time. whether it's whether it's a credit card or a line of credit, just having access to some reserve capital is really important. And then the equity side, a lot of times that comes earlier, even before the debt. That I think that usually comes in formation or it comes later in the cycle in concert with a larger scale expansion. So, there are some guarantee issues that come into play with private equity that get a little complicated with SBA. Is that the SBA will require anybody who's a 20% owner of the business to personally guarantee the loan. That's a pretty hard and fast rule from what I've gathered. So depending on what sort of stake the private equity company takes in the business, that can become a problem. But it could be possible to do, to undertake a project with all private equity to a point where you don't need an SBA loan or you don't need debt. So I look at a lot of these products, whether it's private equity or any of the loan products, conventional SBA or otherwise, as tools, in a toolbox. So like when you look at what you're trying to accomplish, it's more about what combination of products basically allow the brewery to accomplish that. And just one other point I want to just speak on, because I don't know that I'll have a chance otherwise, is like, I think breweries that have a combination of, business expertise and then brewing expertise are really important. I know there's a lot of talk about the liquid, right? It's about what's in the bottle. It's about the product. It's not about what's in the bottle. It's about, can you run a damn business? Like, that's my biggest concern.
Right. So let's talk about that in a moment. Is it okay if we take a break? I think that way it'd be good.
That'd be a good place to come back.
Yeah, to come back and talk about like what is the bank looking for if it's not just what's in the glass? Because I've heard from other people when it comes to buyouts and stuff, that's really all that it's about. It's all about what's in the glass.
As long as it makes us make better beer.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean that's what you.
Doesn't matter who buys you, because it's all about what's in the glass.
Doesn't matter if there's
we're not about
taurine
why maybe banks don't agree with that, because they care about the heart and soul of a brewery, is what I imagine. I think that's where we're headed. Anyway, let's take a 5-minute break so I can refill my glass, and then we'll come back with more with Brewer Dave and Banker Dan. All right.
Welcome back to the Beer Temple podcast. We're talking how to finance your brewery, an idiot's guide to from non-idiots, though. Didn't mean to imply anything there.
A guide for idiots.
You're probably an idiot.
You're probably an idiot.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get into that as well.
Yeah.
By the way,
I'm here with my co-host Chris Quinn.
Hello.
Fade Master Surge. Mm-hmm. Dave Bleitner of Off Color fame.
Howdy.
And Banker Dan from the Ether. Mm-hmm. We got a special silent guest.
Peanut Gallery guy.
Peanut Gallery. Tim Lang action.
Yeah. So you were talking, Dan, about how lenders, a lot of people think that maybe bankers are looking at like, is your beer the best beer, or is it going to be the best beer? And that's not what they're looking for, right? They're not looking for who can make the best beer necessarily. Not that they may be right, not like that they don't like that, but go on.
Yeah, not exclusively. I mean, if anything, I'm almost a little more concerned about the operational side and who's running the business, because ultimately it's a business, and the profitability of the business will repay my loan. The loans are repaid out of profits. So I've always been partial to breweries that have a two-headed approach or a two-pronged approach. You have someone on the production side and you have someone on the business side. I think it's really hard. And again, I'm not a brewer, but I would just imagine it to be very hard to both produce, sell, and run a business. Like those are borderline three full-time jobs, right? And I think it was a couple of years ago. There were breweries, losing their head brewer and then being like, oh well, what's going to happen to the brewery now that their brewers are gone? Because we've seen these investor led breweries, right, that are almost like a marketing company with hired talent. And as a lender, I sit in the background and maybe just knowing a little bit more about the industry. But if you've invested in, so I'm not sure all the breweries that do this, but like if a brewery was launched in the back of a capital stack from investors, and we're like, oh, we'll just go find a brewer and install them to make our product, and that person leaves, it casts a lot of doubt into the business in terms of how it's going to continue to operate, versus the brewery that is that has that brewer in equity, bringing a sense of permanence and stability to the relationship, and then also then splitting that responsibility with somebody who is on more of the managerial side of the house. I think that's a combination that I've been that I have preference to. That's my concern, is really the operation of the company, and frankly, can they run a good company? Because I've had brewers ask me, like, what concerns you most, and I'm like, frankly, what shows up on Instagram probably worries me the most, because that can absolutely derail a business.
Like
in the negative way,
right? Not coming from the brewer, but about the brewer.
Well, hopefully, yeah,
could be both.
Or what's on the Truth app. That's also.
I don't even know about that one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't want to know about that.
It won't be around very long.
Okay.
So you're saying you lend based on how sick someone's Instagram is?
Yeah, I mean, I actually like to
Yeah,
put the bottle caps into the credit memo.
Right.
I instead of saying like the risk
in my
code
pitch
is
deck.
3.75, it's like it's 3.75 bottle caps.
Why aren't we using can tabs yet? I mean, I think we're there.
Bottle
Yeah, the
caps.
pull
And I
tabs.
think, to your point,
Old school.
Yeah.
but how can you effectively run a brewery, especially in the production side, if you don't know how to brew? I mean, that was like my philosophy going in. And prior to starting Off Color, we decided to get as much experience as we could on the how to do it side. So from day one, because I personally, I have a business background, and I wanted to learn everything I could about jumping in and doing the day-to-day stuff. And even to this day, when the canning line breaks down, I'm the guy that's there till midnight trying to fix the can over an eighth of an inch.
It moved over
yeah.
3/16 of an inch,
Just,
and now everything's blowing up.
yeah, you get the no, it's blowing up. That kind of thing.
There goes $15,000.
But I think that's, to your point, in addition to having both sides of that, you also need almost immaculate communication between them. And I guess trust too, but just
Immaculate
Yeah, I mean,
communication is a good way to put it.
thank you.
I might use that line again, Dave. I will attribute it to you every time I do. It's hard enough. One of the areas that, I mentioned personal guarantees earlier, that it's kind of a hallmark of SBA lending. It's required of a lot of small business loans, or small and mid-sized business loans anyway. The real value, I think, of a personal guarantee to a lender's perspective is to align interests. It's to make sure that the bank and the business are both pulling in the same direction. Again, using that premise that I'm not in the lending business, I'm going to get my money back business, that we want to make sure we're all going in the same direction. So I've seen plenty of scenarios where, like, I don't want to personally guarantee. It's like, that's great, I don't want to lend to you.
Yeah.
I mean,
I have a question.
If you're the one calling the shots, then
If all right, they're like, oh, here, personally guarantee this $1 bajillion.
Yep.
Theoretically, what happens when you don't have that and you go under?
They take everything, and then I guess they're stuck.
But
with
then
what's
what?
left?
Like, I mean, I guess I don't understand how you can be like, oh, let's personally guarantee $20 million from a person who has a $15,000 credit card. I mean, what's the long play of that? How that all folds out? Just curious. I probably should ask this from my lender.
Nah.
Yeah. So I think most importantly, it's to align interests. So it's just to make sure that, we want the payment to
scare
come in every
you.
month. After that, it's, I mean, if you're talking about a $15,000 net worth versus a $20 million obligation, that guarantee doesn't probably have a lot of value. I don't think the guarantee for most loans is there to pay off the debt. I think that's unrealistic in the vast majority of situations, considering you have entire asset classes that a bank can't go after, like retirement funds or home that might be titled with you and a spouse. What happens when it goes wrong? I mean, something that never really gets talked about is that there's a loss to the government on the end of every SBA loan, right? So, and that can lead to various types of garnishments, from tax refunds to, any money that might be coming back your way is probably not ever going to be coming back your way. until they satisfy that debt.
So
So
they get 20 bajillion.
Uh,
out of it.
right. So the personal guarantee. Again, rarely have I done loans where the personal guarantee would satisfy it. But those are also the loans that aren't going SBA, and those are the loans that get approved automatically. If the individual is so strong behind it that it's
Right.
like, well, how much money would you like, Dave? Here you go.
Yeah.
Let me know, because
Nice.
if it goes
Then you
wrong,
probably
just
don't
pay
need
you
it.
back.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's that situation that a lot of the joke about banks, like only lending you money when you don't need it, comes from. But in reality, I mean, that's my personal opinion on bank guarantees, not to the opinion of any of my current or past employers. So
No, makes sense.
Yeah.
And I do know that with the guarantees, I know with the startup, I did get an SBA, and it wasn't manufacturing; it was a liquor store. I think I had to put up 50%, and then I had to guarantee the other 50%. And I was thinking, like,
Why don't I
what the
just-
heck?
Yeah.
I mean,
You
why
had to
am I
put-
doing
50
this?
plus
Wait, you had to put-
50.
You had to put up 50% of the amount of money you were asking for.
Of
The
the total
project.
startup, yeah, I had to
In
put up
collateral or
50% in
straight cash.
no, cash. And then I had to, with collateral, I had to collateralize the other 50%. And not with like
So you-
retirement funds, like all stuff that they could
Take. Yeah.
and then sign over
it's-
the fact that yes, you may basically pre-give it to them.
Yeah.
Is what I had to do.
Yeah. See you in 8 years. I'm keeping it warm.
I'll
for
give you the
Yeah.
money, and you just give me the money right back, and you still owe me.
We'll just pass
Exactly.
it. We'll pass it back and
Maybe-
forth,
maybe
and we'll
some
pay
interest for
fees
letting
each
you
time
use
until
the
none of us have any money left over.
Yeah. Oh, plus interest. You forget. Yes. Thank you, Dan. Plus the interest.
don't forget that.
Yes. No, it was rough, but I will say then when we needed a loan the second time after 3-4 years, it was considerably easier
Because
to
you
find a lender.
had paid the money back, or
Yeah.
because you had nothing left.
I talked to
and-
probably 50 banks the first time to
Yeah.
get one offer, and I probably
Five,
had
yeah.
3 or 4 banks, and they all gave me offers the second time.
because you were in business for 4
Sales.
years.
A couple of years, yeah.
Yeah, I think Chris, you hit on a good point there, and it's kind of the idea of what and I know this is kind of the section that we're moving into, which is like what does the bank look for in a borrower? What does the borrower look for in a bank? I think that most business loans are really not about the first loan; it's about the second loan. So when you look at a relationship, right? Because they're going to have a lien on all your assets. So you look at the beer temple; it all falls under the company. The bank files the lien against all the assets. They don't just finance the bar and the cooler. They the lien goes on everything, right? So when you think of it a relationship, especially if you're going to be growing or seeing your needs change, I think that's where you're trying to pick a partner that's really going to be more for that next loan, because the first loan is where you're speaking to a number of banks, you're getting a number of term sheets, it's all competitively bid. It's a little harder to do that the second time, so unless you want to go to market again. But it's when you have that other project, that other acquisition, that other expansion, that you want to have a relationship you can go back to. And I think that's an important part of the bank borrower relationship, is the idea that you take care of them the first time, they come back the second time. And I think that's to your point about, Chris, or on the first segment where we were talking about manufacturing, like the reason that banks like manufacturing so much is because they're really capital intensive. There's always another piece of equipment or an expansion or this or that coming down the line versus the one and done type transactional loan. And don't get me wrong, the transactional side of banking is a big part of it, especially in the SBA space, but that the relationship, I think, is really an important part that a business, a brewery business or otherwise, could really benefit from if they seek it out. And maybe, it doesn't always come to work out the exact way you hoped it would, but you can find a transaction lender who's just going to finance the one project almost on a one and done basis, no strings attached except that little string about payment, versus the relationship that's probably more of the community bank, local bank model, that you go to them for the next request and you kind of keep those lines of communication open so that they're prepped for when that next project comes. next opportunity comes.
But how would that be different than the next opportunity being like an expansion, or like I need a little mechanical finger to push this thing an eighth of an inch, or either?
All of them, all the above.
Okay.
If the company's doing well, you're happy to take any request that comes in the door. From a $50,000 equipment note to a vehicle loan to multi-million-dollar expansion. I think that's when you look at the relationship model of banking, which pretty much every bank has in some form or fashion. That's really what it's there for. It's not for the initial loan. It's for the idea that the relationship grows over time and that you have the inside track on that.
Got it.
Until the bank gets sold to a different bank. And nowhere you go, and I don't know anybody there.
Yeah. Who also then probably wants the relationship. So,
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out that way. So, Chicago has a long history of bank acquisitions that didn't exactly work out for the acquiring bank.
Yeah, we started with Wintrust, and I kept getting checks with different bank names on it, and they're like, "Which bank are you in?" I don't know.
Yeah.
It was First Chicago for a while, and then something else, but it was like Northbrook Bank for a while.
I think every bank I've gone to is now and worked with, including now my private bank is now different than the one I
the
opened.
private bank.
No, I mean like my personal bank, not a private bank.
Monocles.
Private investor.
right.
Look
That
at
little
this.
room
Personal.
in the corner where the regular people
I
waiting
need
to cash
put
their
50% down on my SBA
No.
loan. Now I have a private bank going to Fire Festival.
My PayPal is still linked to a LaSalle bank account. I'll just say that. So that's what I meant, which is long gone,
Old school.
long gone. Yeah,
But it sounds good.
yeah, exactly. I like the street.
But it's not inside a Jewel though.
It's true. It's true.
Oh, yeah. It's
There's
just the
so-
Bank of America. at
There are
this point.
probably so many DePaul alumni walking around with TCF bank checks still.
So then you're looking for somebody who knows business, Dan, knows beer, or knows something about the industry of beer. I hopefully
or a
be
team of people.
making
A team of people that have these skills.
right.
That's preferable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what about? I mean, I guess the vision would come from the business side, because there's knowing finance, but then there's knowing kind of, I guess, having a business vision as well.
Well, it's
right?
probably ideally both, right? You have some brewer has a vision for what the industry looks like, then you have someone who understands how the financial aspect of that works. I didn't mean to answer for you, and that probably is wrong, but
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's the combination and the partnership between the two that make it work. I mean, what is it? Hair of the Dog just announced their closing right last week. So it's not just about one or the other. And this isn't a commentary on Hair of the Dog or really any one brewery. It's the industry changes, and can you keep up with it? I mean, what is it? The seltzer discussion of 2 years ago. It's the, whatever the, a lot of companies are, say, pivoting away from even core beer production to other beverages or coffee. I mean, think about how many places that have seltzers and coffee and spirits, and it's being able to maneuver the business relative to the changing market, and not just we're going to do what we do until it doesn't work and then we fail.
And just from the lender side of things again, are you guys are you looking at the overall beer market and looking for people who seem to be clued in and are making smoothie seltzers and pastry milds and all the other hot new styles?
pastry mild.
No. I mean, I think the first brewery loan I brought in several years ago, the commentary was, "Wow, that's cool. Let's buy my house."
I mean, there is something telling in that, though, right? Why have so many breweries survived? Oh, because they're by someone's house.
Right.
Yeah.
Why are there 9,000 breweries?
The vast majority of lenders who are, who'd make a loan to a brewery don't give a shit about pastry milds and, smoothies. It's
So-
more or less, make your product whatever it is, and, run a good company, make some profits, take care of your employees, that's really what we're looking for. And then have a strategic vision that's, proactive instead of reactive, right? You're not just like, well, I've been in several occasions where, even if things aren't going right, I've had people just throw up their hands and go, I don't know. It's like, that's not a comforting, reaction, right? You want to be like, okay, no, look, think about, because the last time I was on the show was what? We were talking about the pandemic, PPP. Yeah, it's
bad times.
2 years.
Yeah.
Right. The reaction, the reality is like, that was the biggest free fall time I've seen in my 16 years of doing this. But, when obviously once people get their feet under them a little bit, it's like, all right, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to pivot to online sales, or we're going to do curbside pickup. Like, that's a far more comforting discussion than like, shit, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not exactly what you want to hear when, the world is in a very challenging and unstable place, right? I want the businesses who are going to pivot and get creative and, find a way to survive. And that's really what it was about.
Most adaptable survive, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What about the creationists?
Yeah, exactly.
We have to have equal time on the show for the Darwinists and the creationists.
Yeah,
A creationist brewer. That would be somebody who owns their own stuff, right? They're creating. Well, that's all suppliers are creationists, right?
We all create our own world.
Jesus just had the water, and he's like, yeah, it's wine now.
Then he made the
That's
dinosaurs.
what you do. You turn water into beer.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Essentially.
Well, I got some guys that do it.
Right. Yeah. You've got a team of...
Like, does anyone think Jesus really did that? Like, no, he had a couple of guys working in the back. No, anyway.
Come on, turn that water into wine, into beer.
Work harder.
Right.
We got to pivot. They don't want water anymore. They want wine.
We got it. We got you covered.
Yeah. We're in the service industry. It's a wedding, guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Very good. You just kept going with that one. You made it.
I went to CCD. I'm
Quite the
confirmed,
conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Dig it.
I was an
The
altar
grandmother's
boy.
rolling in the grave that I didn't know the answer to that.
Right. What? So Dan, and everyone else now on the flip side, is it possible to, when you're looking for lender, like how do you recommend shopping for a lender, or Dave, or for anyone else? I've been kind of I had no choice, so I went with the person who had me the first time, who would take me.
The first girl that
and
said
then I was
yes.
kind of bound to them by a couple different, for a couple different reasons, because I had gone with them the first time. I kind of it made them the only viable option the second time, and now I think for a third loan, my choices would legitimately, I'd be able to shop around a little bit better, but I think most people are not in that situation. So this is something where I have no understanding.
As someone who's gone through 2 rounds of that, how do you feel about it? Do you wish you could have had a wider breadth second time?
Absolutely, because I had to take the only offer, and then the second time around, they were very aware of the position that they were in, that even without having the strongest offer, just the fact that I was still paying off another loan from them, because it was an additional loan that they would have first position on, made it really impossible for any lender to kind of compete with what they were doing, because they were just kind of stacking where other ones would be taking a secondary position, and therefore their risk would go up because they're coming behind a different loan. I just kind of did it like a jackass.
Why wouldn't they let you just refinance it?
Just kind of buy out the whole thing.
Buy out the first loan, too.
I think, man, Dan, you helped me on this one too. I think because it was the type of loan that it was the type of SBA.
Oh, we can't refinance SBA.
I don't
with
know.
SBA.
Yeah, refinance one with the other.
Yeah, that's why.
So that's what we can just call a relationship.
Exactly. This kind of relationship where the guy's got like, it
No,
was
they do
not
that under the
Chris
table.
was
Yeah, that's true.
miming a gun.
Right. No, it was not that, but it was just how it went. But now
They made you an offer you couldn't
things-
refuse, and then put a horse head in your bed. And
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there are some quirks and qualifications inside of the program that don't allow one to pay off another. So that can be a inhibitor, a barrier, call it, for the borrower in seeking a new bank. I think when you're asking about where to start, I think the starting point is always with the incumbent. It's the logical first step. At the same time, I also think it's also good to explore options. Whether that's with your accountant or your attorney. I think those are often two people who have contacts outside of obviously your current lender. That's a really good place to just ask around. Again, if you're with an accountant who understands the beer industry and an attorney who does that, there's a good chance that they know some other folks who are in the lending space. Within the SBA world, I'd say there's two dominant business models. There is the secondary market origination and the more traditional, conventional relationship bank approach, right? The secondary market is just that. It's a single transaction. They're going to originate your loan. They're going to sell part of it off to investors. It's not too dissimilar to home loans in a lot of ways, right? I bought a house, got a 30-year mortgage, got originated by one company, sold to a bank. There's a similar market for SBA funding versus then the more traditional approach, which is the more relationship-based approach, I think, which is the institution itself. They hold it on their balance sheet. So there are times certainly where the incumbent has an advantage. That being said, it's rare that it would be so difficult that you couldn't refinance it. I think a lot of times that if you're in a position where frankly, the number one goal is to get a loan, right? We can discuss, the terms and the rates and the rest, but like the goal is to get the loan, and the reality of the cost of it is 1% matters, but what's more important is actually obtaining the loan than did I get it at 5% or 6%. When you're playing from a position of strength, like maybe the business is doing better and the cash flow is improved, I think you can then look to refinance. And there are no restrictions on refinancing SBA loans. There's no prepayment penalties. So you have that option as you go. But that's kind of my approach, is start with the incumbent. At the same time, don't just take one answer. It's not just, I think you have to be your own advocate as a small business owner, right? You need to be educated. You need to understand the programs. You need to understand what's out there. You need to understand, the incentives that are in the market, and not just take, a monocle wearing bald banker like myself as the only provider of that knowledge. So I think that's where the network, of professionals, I think, obviously you have your bank, your attorney, accountant, keeping in touch with them and letting them know the project, and also socializing that request with the bank before it comes up, right? It's not just, hey, guess what? Like I want to go buy a restaurant.
Right.
But having that discussion and keeping in contact can also help warm them up to the request that's coming before it comes. And you really only get, whether it's your first loan or a second or third or an expansion, you really only get one shot to make that impression, right? So when you lay it out in a way that you want to lay it out in a way that benefits and increases your likelihood of getting a loan. And I think not just dropping it on them, but rather keeping in touch with your lender, whoever your contact at the bank is, and letting them know how business is going, and also maybe what's coming down the line, is a good way of kind of greasing the skids for that next loan.
I have noticed that smaller banks too, they reach out to you. They do like just check in, call you.
You got our money, right?
It's got like it does have like a little salesman.
cash the check.
There's like
We don't have an online
more
portal,
of a
so you got
salesman.
that check.
There's more of a salesman vibe to it, but they do want to set up times to just meet and see how things are going. And I always assume they're just going to try to pitch me on something, but I think, hearing Dan does make it seem a little bit more kind of like it's good to have a long-term relationship. Take his sales call, listen to whatever product he's trying to sell, if he is, maybe he or she isn't, and, build some rapport.
Well, and I think a good takeaway from this is that this is supposed to be a mutually beneficial relationship and not an adversarial one, right? You're not like, screw these banker guys. They're always coming after me for the money I owe them. This is a whole big string.
That they lent me.
It really is something where like it behooves them to see you succeed and to keep working with you, right? They're not trying to take money from you that you didn't agree to give them when you took the loan in, but it can feel that way.
You're like, I didn't even read it.
Yeah.
Really long.
It was
Most
long. It
people
was like a
don't.
Harry Potter book. I couldn't even
So
get
many
through all that.
words.
Like the later Harry Potter book.
Yeah,
Not like
when
the early one.
and not the same size font either. This
Yeah.
was tight.
Yeah, you can get that one through. So I have a question.
Do you have an audiobook version of
Crypto. Can that help?
Yeah.
No.
No. I mean, I don't understand what it is, so I guess
I just
Cut that part out,
all my
Serge. I got a lot
SBA
of
money
positions that we can-
and put it into crypto.
this? Yeah. Can you be an
I got
SBA
some
loan?
NFTs I'm going to buy.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you put can I put the
SBA loan to buy a gorilla crypto
Yeah.
NFT.
You said
It's
there's
a good
no
way to end up in
thing.
jail.
oh,
there's better
Yeah.
ways to
I
end up in
post-
jail.
I had to delete that slide from the pitch deck then.
Yeah, I'd say that the majority of a large part of a relationship manager, who's the person who is calling you, yes, they are probably trying to cross sell you on something at some point, but the real reason they're there is to check in on the business, see what's going on, if there's any other opportunities coming down the line. It's really not to try and pitch you a credit card. It really
right.
is just to keep your finger on the pulse. And obviously, as the larger the relationship, the closer they're going to be paying
And
attention to
sometimes
what's going
they'll
on.
even come in and tell you about something you didn't even know you needed. I mean, I think that helps
Could be,
too.
yeah. Absolutely. Here's a new product, a new program, a new tax write-off, whatever it is, right? Like, I think lenders in general are trying to find a way to bring value to a relationship because it's a commodity, right? We sell money, and that money has a cost, and that's pretty easy to understand and compete against. But if you're trying to find a way to bring benefit to that relationship, I think that builds some loyalty, both ways, I guess. But that's really what you're trying to keep. I mean, if you look at a city like, look at the state of Illinois, it's not like businesses are flocking to Illinois to expand, right? More often than not, you hear them going to Indiana
Not
or Wisconsin.
exactly.
So what does that mean? It means that it's poaching, that there's some growth that takes place, but a lot of it comes at the expense of another bank, right? There's a handful, there's almost a fixed number of businesses, and they move around as banks take them from each other. It's not like there's a ton of organic growth in the market. So if you as an institution can identify your clients, attract them, and retain them, that's a pretty viable strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the last couple of years, you talk about how the banks helped me in particular get through all the PPP stuff. I mean, that was vital because
Sure.
I'm not going to read it all. It's really long.
Yeah. No,
They make it pretty
I mean,
easy.
that
And
Dan right here, and Randy, who is a CPA, and they were all incredibly, and my bank, very, very helpful for all that sort of stuff, and letting me know about other things that weren't just the PPP that we could take advantage of, and that would really kind of help. It's all. It's kind of like an attorney's. It's fun to make fun of them until you really, really need one,
Right.
and they
until
save your
half
butt.
Until half your business closes and half your
right.
customers close, and then you're like, now what?
Exactly. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Mike. But like, what are some of the things that you're thinking about doing as far as approaches that you're taking, and is funding and bank funding and stuff like that? I'm assuming that it plays an important role in it, but I'm just kind of curious, where your kind of head is at with owning production and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we currently we produce our own beer and own the tanks and the packaging equipment. We don't own the brew house, but we do it out of someone else's facility. And the next phase of our growth is hopefully to open a facility that we own more of that, right? We specialize in making Saison. So one of the things I'm thinking about now is not buying a brew house, continuing the relationship we have with our current host brewery to produce wort, to have a less capital intensive investment in the fermentation space, but also put a tap room in that space. So to have a brewery, but without the actual engine, right? So that's
like a Flintstones car.
I use my own feet to heat up the mash tun. But it's one of those things where I look around.
That's very green of you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I look around, I see like there's a brew house there's 9,000 brew houses out there, right? So why do I need to buy one if I can produce beer without it? It's a different concept of looking at what does it mean to have the means of production. We literally wouldn't have the thing that can make you wort, but there's a lot of them around the city. I have a lot of relationships around the city, and so leveraging what I do have, right, the friendships, the relationships, the track record of brewing on someone else's equipment for 2 years, and then not having to spend, I don't know, whatever a brew house costs these days, like hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. And the way to fund it, like we're completely self-funded up to this point, so it changes often what I'm looking at, from being like, can I get the SBA or a bank to lend me the money to build out a tap room in a fermentation space, or should I do more friends and family equity raising and then do a SBA loan only for equipment? These are all things I think about, and we're not quite at the point of actually pulling the trigger on any of it. So I was going to talk to Dan about it at some point in the near future. But yeah, that's where I'm at currently, and this is more from coming from a beer production knowledge space of like, there's a lot of brew houses that don't turn every day, and there's a lot of further fermentation space that actually isn't getting used a lot of places. So it's a more dispersed model of beer production, but it is one that is, I think, in a weird way, leaner often. So
probably leaner, especially if you don't see that capacity rapidly filling up anytime soon. Because even if where your host brewery or your host wort production facility location were to be become fully go to full capacity, you could find in your mind, I would assume, another place.
Right.
But not without its own risk.
100%. There's certainly risk in everyone saying no, or they're not
get out of here.
Not having the actual way to turn the key in the engine is certainly a risk, but one that I think with in a town with something like 170 breweries within an hour and a half drive is not one that I'm too concerned about. And it's also go ahead.
No, I think I think what you're describing is a very savvy view of the market, right? And I think you obviously build in contingencies. Yeah, very, very good. I mean, not that I'm going to give you a loan number, but I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, not that sick then.
Sick.
Good idea.
Yeah.
For someone else.
Well, it's
exactly
right.
No, but I think also building in contingencies, right?
Right.
This is the current model, and this is the backup, and this is the point where it makes sense to have the means of productions and have that capacity in house, right? And presenting it as a cohesive plan, I think has a lot of advantage. I mean, frankly, you and others in the industry know a whole hell of a lot more about it than I do, no matter how many Beer Temple podcasts I listen to, right?
You're probably actually decreasing your knowledge by listening to too many of these.
Hey, come on! I can see the future.
Well, yeah, but my crypto dust is, I'm long on dust NFTs. So.
Yeah, well, that's what you should be.
Yeah. So just selfishly, is that
It's a hold.
is presenting that like kind of more complex of a model to a lender something that is meaningful, or is it just presenting here's the numbers of what we can do and here's what we need to do to spend it? Is that just they're just care more about that? Like if
I think it's both.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's numbers. Obviously, the numbers create the cash flow. The cash flow pays the loan, right? So, running that equation through, but then, understanding how many brew houses are in Chicago and the excess capacity that's in the market, and the fact that you think you can take advantage of some of that excess capacity and be a little bit leaner and have a positive impact on your cash flow will certainly be appreciated by a lender who understands cash flow.
And it's very
right? And then
go on, Dan.
no, and then just having the backup, right? Like to Jay's point, it's like it's not without its risks, and you're leaning into those risks. You understand them, you're identifying them, you're laying it on the table. I think that's a very reasonable approach. I mean, I like I said earlier, I always the multi-year contract brewing approach, where then you normalize the contract approach to what it would be under production. I think it's basically just a version of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd never thought of that as its own kind of way to market in a more saturated market, one where someone who is potentially maybe undercapitalized, from a classically, speaking, intentionally undercapitalized, to be able to kind of stay, not over leveraged by going into a place that has a lot of production capacity that isn't fully being utilized, finding those locations and then going in there in a more kind of nimble approach is, it's interesting.
Right.
It's an interesting way of thinking about it.
I don't really see anyone else doing it, but I think I can pull it off. So that should
Well,
put that
now
in
you
the-
just
put that-
told
put that in the
everyone
plan.
how to do it.
I didn't tell
You
them how
just
to do
told
it.
36 people
Yeah.
how to do
I
it.
have decade-long relationships with enough people that will be like, yeah, you can come and brew on the weekend.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. We have some handwritten letter. We have to talk about letters. We're not going to do a letter this time. We have a handwritten letter that we got to get to. By the way, one of the 36 people.
That's crazy.
There's as many people as there are chambers.
I have a question that's more of like a quick hitter. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people applying for these types of SBA loans in their first approach, putting in their business plan or
The
in
use
their
of the
pitch
word
deck?
"sick" without a K.
By not putting that in, not putting SIQ somewhere in their business plan.
Yeah.
Make beer that's so sick, and then like the little like
Hang
surfs up
loose.
emoji.
Yeah, surfs up. Yeah. Mhm.
Is that the biggest one?
Relying on Wu-Tang.
Is that the biggest
No.
No, but like, what are some simple pitfalls that people fall into that are just like are quick? Like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or this is not
Spell
something
check
we're
has
gonna-
to be number one.
And obviously, other than just like you guys are not a viable business. Like that's obviously not one that you want to. I can't fix that. That's just kind of built into my business.
I think the first is recognizing that the SBA doesn't make loans, and that the bank does.
Right.
So I've had plenty of times people say like, "Well, this is what the program does." I'm like, "Well, no, it doesn't. Like this is what I do. Like this is how this works. The bank makes the loan. The SBA doesn't make the loan." The presumption that the bank needs to do something, like I always think about lending as kind of a courtship process. Like you're each trying to convince each other that it's a good idea.
Yeah.
That
Dan doesn't fuck on the first date. That's what I'm
You
saying.
don't know that.
I do know it. Dan is.
How many dates
I
have you
mean,
been on with Dan?
True, but I can just tell that he's not that type of guy.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's all I'm going to
good
say.
point, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I'm looking out for you.
I think it's being unprepared, and not having thought through the plans. Like Mike, I think what you were describing regarding using some of these excess brew houses was a very thoughtful analysis, right? Like, and you can carry that out to, the contingency plan, and then at the point at which it makes sense to have your own, you only get one shot to make that first impression, and that's really important. Yeah, I'd say those are some of the ones that jump to mind immediately, and just having reserves and having backup, right? Like having contingency plans. It's not like, well, put all my cash into this project. If it doesn't work, then shit, like we're done,
Right.
But saying like, all right, here's the fallback, right? Like, all right, this is how we're going to go to market. This is if this, here are our projections. Here's our middle of the road case, our worst case, and our best case. And we think we can cash flow this on our worst case scenario, and here's where we hope to, and obviously here's what we aspire to. Provides a lot of comfort to the analyst and a person who's really just looking at spreadsheets, a business plan, and maybe some historicals to try and figure out if it's a good use of however much money you're looking for. But having that backup plan is really important. If you come to me, here's an example of a transaction I looked at. It goes back a few years, but it was an ice cream parlor. Not exactly my forte, but initial project came in, and they were looking for a $60,000 loan. It was kind of where I was at the time. It was local. It was across the street. Then they went dark for 2 years and came back, and what was a $60,000 project turned into a $500,000 project. Except they burned up a bunch of their cash. So in the beginning, they had a huge they had $100,000 of cash. They needed to borrow a very little bit. They had a lot of cash reserves, and then they wanted to 2 years go by, and then they want to build the Taj Mahal of ice cream parlors. And it doesn't work, right? Like all of a sudden they kind of go, they burn up some of their cash, and they push in into a much larger project that it was kind of all or nothing, and those are the sort of projects that banks aren't really built for, I mean, I was reading about Wintrust, which I know got referenced earlier. They have I was in Cranes today, that they have a venture capital fund for early stage businesses. That's venture capital. That's not traditional bank financing. There's a reason that they spun off a separate unit to do that. It's a different type of lending. It's a different type of financing prospect. So I think being prepared, having thought through your contingencies, and presenting a cohesive plan out of the gate is critical. You don't get to unring the bell.
Yeah, well put. I do think what's helped me was a well thought out, well written, and well presented business plan.
Like traditional business plan, or were you like a pitch deck of like, here's what I'm doing?
Yeah, I mean, mine was just like more looked like a research paper than like
we didn't
a PowerPoint.
have that.
No.
Like the early 2010s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no deck. It was just paper.
Yeah, there was no pitch deck.
Napkins.
We just like...
And it went...
money printer go burr.
Clack, 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 clack. That's how mine
And
went.
then in the final napkin slide that said the ask is money printer go burr, how much you have.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think probably the biggest thing that Chris is getting to is you have to know what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, I think.
Yeah.
And build everything else around that.
Right.
Like we knew we wanted to do production, and we just wanted to start with production, and that's what we did. Made it a lot easier. It was focused. You've kicked a lot of ideas around, and I think at some point you probably just need to decide, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think going to a banker and with that kind of level of confidence would help you quite a bit.
And they're not there to help you figure out what's the smartest thing for you to do with the money that you're asking them to give you.
That's why we're
your
here
job.
right now.
Yeah.
We're here to help
They
you.
actually can't.
Yeah, they're there to tell you you're a moron.
No, seriously, they can't. It's called lender liability.
Right.
So if they say do this or don't do that, and it doesn't work, then all of a sudden they've instructed you to do something with your business, and that can actually fall back onto the bank.
Right.
So it's not, you're right, it's not their point to tell you how to run your business. They can offer suggestions. They can say, this is what I would do, or we would support, or what we would have an appetite for.
I would pay back that loan. Kick rocks, bud.
I would pay back that loan. Then again, I want to have a house to sleep in tonight. You may not. It's up to you. I'm going to pull the trigger on this gun. If you're in front of it, it's your own fault.
You keep moving it. Stop moving it, Chris.
you hit yourself with the bullet.
Exactly. Well, anything else before we start wrapping things up? Move on to the kind of closing stages of the show. We're all about closing. A, B, C.
Always be closing.
That's how I get my coffee. So
Exactly.
It's the best way to
You've
get a bank loan.
you've earned your coffee, Dan.
thank you, Chris.
Yes. Well. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. So we'll get to some final thoughts in just a moment, but there's a few important things that I want to discuss. One I mention pretty much every week is that you guys can reach out to us out there listening. You can send us a letter at the Beer Temple podcast. Thank you to the handwritten letter that was recently submitted. But if you want to do your own, it could be 3173 North Elston Avenue in Chicago. That's the address of the Beer Temple. Put something about the podcast or Strong Mike or Strange Mike or Obi Chris Quinobi.
We only
or
see the
something.
future. We don't know the past.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll get it. You can ask any questions or leave comments, or if it kind of sparks different thoughts, or if you just want to hear us talk about certain stuff. We've gotten letters about all that sort of stuff. We actually have one time gotten a letter written on an old-timey typewriter as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. If you want to send an electronic letter, you can do that too. Just send it to
Print it out and
Insiders.
send it to 37. No,
Yeah. Insiders, first email it to insiders@craftbeertemple.com and then put it in the mail just to be sure that it actually arrives.
That's right.
You know, you got to be sure that it's going to get here. So the Postal Service in Chicago is famous for quick and accurate delivery of its mail. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second is, and this is a little self-indulgent, but it's for the greater good, okay? So
rate Beer Temple, 5 bottle caps on Untapped.
So we know that
Take that out, sir.
Mr. Just Loggers was on the last episode, right? So after the show, we may have started another account called
Who's we?
Me, the royal we, called Just Milds.
You're giving up your
with the
anonymity
Z.
already.
Only to you. That's what I'm saying.
Doxing yourself.
No. It's only. This is a secret
Oh,
between
yeah, sorry.
us. Even members, I've been trolling certain other people who may or may not have been on this show before, and they don't know it's me. But oh no, he's going to be listening. Never mind. Okay. Well, the cat's out of the bag then. So anyway,
This went so well.
no, it's fine. But the whole idea is we have to surpass Just Loggers with Just Milds, and it's only going to be about what we care about.
People.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't need that many.
Can we get 230 people to follow Just Mild with a Z?
Just Milds.
With a Z.
I want interactions. I want love of mild. Everyone's favorite and most consumed style.
Yeah.
You know,
Chris, I heard you talking earlier.
pastry
that-
milds.
And you
I think the Z is actually going to help milds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
mild.
so.
It's like, what do you want? I want a mild.
Everyone's like, Gen Z
Mild.
isn't
Or
drinking.
milds.
They're doing pharmaceuticals. They're not going out and supporting breweries. Like milds
Yeah.
with a Z.
I just think a malt driven, low hop, English, very low.
Yeah.
Alcohol, very unshelf stable style is the next big thing.
Right.
We got to show the world that that's the
Yeah,
case.
but just in cask.
Yeah, well,
Only-
obviously
well,
just
yeah.
cask.
Yeah.
To me,
So-
well, that's the other thing. Pastry milds technically are defined as milds that aren't in cask. So you can say I want a pastry mild, but if it's canned, it's technically a pastry
I think
mild.
you found the one style of beer that's harder to find in America than a regular mild.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
the pastry mild.
A
You
pastry
just take
mild.
the cask and you just shake it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Gotta get the New
Pop
England back in it.
We have a pastry mild in the store right now from Temperance. The adventurously mild, I think it's called, or dangerously mild. I forget, something like that.
That sounds like that.
It's a pastry mild. Being again, the definition of a pastry mild is a non-casked mild. You have to remember.
Oh,
But what kind of pastry?
and- yeah.
draft mild is pastry mild.
Any
You're
non-cast.
going to cause a real rift in the
packaged.
with the mild heads on that one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what it's all about.
They're pretty chill, though. They
Yeah.
don't get too crazy.
They're a little mild. They're mild.
They're already
They live
asleep.
that mild life.
They went to sleep at 8:30.
Exactly. So anyway, just go follow it so I can shove it in Pat Burger's face.
I heard you saying also that your one wish, you wouldn't say this on the show, but your one wish is if you follow Just Loggers, unfollow them.
I didn't say that,
Yeah.
but
I
it would
heard you
be
heard it
easy.
here first.
It would technically be easier for me to surpass him if that happened.
Right. You're not saying to do it.
What
I
if we
mean-
just dropped off the platform?
There you
Yeah,
go.
that could
That's
work
fine too.
right? Then
That would
everybody was
also
one.
work. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just within 1 week, 16 followers. I mean, come on.
I was the first, to be fair.
It's true. You were.
I was sitting next to you and you created it, and I was like, this is the content I need because I didn't just see it a second ago when you took
Yeah.
that picture.
Yeah, there you are. So that's the one thing I wanted to say. Now, would anyone else like to say anything in closing before we get out of here? Thank you for indulging me, everyone. I very much appreciate that. So, Dan, anything you want to say?
Proud to be follower number 17.
Wow.
Yes,
18.
working.
Wow.
It's working.
Suck it, Pat.
There you go.
Oh, look at that one.
Great.
That's a good
That
That's a
foam.
nice
Look at
mild.
that.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's a cask
Yeah.
mild. That's a non-pastry mild.
That's
right
a
there.
hand-pulled mild.
There
Yeah,
you go.
That's not,
You can't
that-
see this,
that's
so
a
it's
stock
horrible
photo.
podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
pretty
But,
sure
but
that
they can hear in your voice how excited you are.
So you can have to log
You
in.
too can.
look
These
at
tasty
that.
milds with
There's
a Z.
5 pictures.
Just
5.
Was just milds with an S taken?
Yes.
How many followers did they have?
It was a
Are those-
woman named like Miley or something, and I guess her nickname is Milds or something. So,
They're all clothed.
Come on.
All right, I'm gonna follow her too.
Yeah, just
Pictures.
follow her. Might as well.
I mean, I follow like 6 people.
This has been a very interesting show of being very like technical and informative and helpful, and then also
banking.
this.
Oh.
Also banking.
Oh,
Yeah.
never mind.
Right.
All right. Well, anything. I mean, I know you're all busy. Usually, people are staring at their phones while I'm introducing the show.
That's
not
Edward.
usually at the end of the show. Yeah. Let me see.
That's just milds. with
Oh
an S.
my gosh, she has
holding
an
an
assault
AR-15.
rifle. That's not
Yeah.
very mild.
So you're not getting that one. Yeah, there's no way you're
Is
taking
that
over
the
that
truth
account.
platform?
Yeah, I guess.
exactly.
Girls like girls like guns too.
Okay, good,
All right.
good place to
All
end
right,
it,
yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Final thoughts with just milds.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I
Mike?
was going to say, Dave and Dan, thank you for coming on. Tim, thank you for lurking. Serge, thanks for surging, fading. Honestly, this has probably been personally one of the most informative podcasts we've ever done. And I hope it was helpful to anyone out there. If you have further questions about stuff like this, send them in. We can annoy Dan with them at a later date too, and get some get another good show.
and then up next week, we've got another hot take history coming up again.
Which one's this one?
Stout this time.
Stout. Oh, with Mr. Mike.
Yeah, Mike Siegel
Very fun.
coming in. We're talking about the history of stouts from
From a dumbass's
non-pastry
perspective.
to just some dipshit.
couple two jerks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Serge.
going to talk about stout and very, very fascinating stuff. I think you're going to really like that episode too.
We have about 90 seconds to end at 20,
What I was talking
Yeah,
about?
you're-
Get out of here.
22, 22, 22.
Wow,
Yeah, we
we
gotta
almost
do it.
made it.
Yeah.
So now we got to
we'll
sit
do it.
On
We're going to wait for dead air, so
22,
we end at 22,
22,
22, 22.
22.
Can't believe we
Yeah.
got so close to that.
Now we need to have 22 seconds of silent dead air.
No, only
before-
about 45 seconds.
before we end.
We can just
Oh,
count
fine.
it down.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. 43.
Serge, how long is that fade
42.
out? How long is that end song? Perfect. Hit it.
Start it now.
All right.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, 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 again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, again, again.